Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes, and this is the daily brief where I provide Ukraine war news every day in the morning, and then in the evening, I'll do three big stories. Um, as I'm looking at what's happened today, there are massive drone strikes, massive Ukrainian drone strikes, and I'm looking at it, it looks like the Ukrainians are fighting a different war than the Russians. The Russians are trying to fight a conventional war where they're, everything that they thought that they would be doing in 2022, that kind of warfare. And oh yes, and we're adding these drones as a layer on top, like an add-on. The Ukrainians are fighting a drone war with a layer of trying to prevent the Russians from doing things conventionally. They're doing two very different things. And with drones, it's like the Ukrainians have because it's newer, the Ukrainians seem to have like a first mover advantage, if that makes sense. Like they seem to innovate quicker than the Russians. While the Russians are using drones to go after electrical grids, the Ukrainians are going after oil supplies and military hardware. And it's a really fascinating thing to watch. Okay, 1,170 Russians off the battlefield, 4 tanks, 27 armored combat vehicles, 56 artillery pieces, and 54 vehicles and fuel tanks. So here's Andrew Perpetua's list. There's a lot, about a 3-to-1 Russian to Ukrainian losses yesterday. Now, I showed you these statistics, and I'm showing you yesterday, and I'm showing you these again because, like, knocking down Shahed drones, they seem to be doing fairly well. But when it comes down to Iskander and Kinzhal missiles and KH missiles, it's not so good. Again, here's yesterday, Russia shot 24, or Ukraine shot down 24 out of 29 Russian Shahed drones, but none of the S-300 ballistic missiles and none of the KH-31P anti-radar missiles. And so the same story, and they'll get the capability eventually, but eventually is in the story of the war, right? Okay, 2 people injured as occupiers 41 times shell borderline settlements in Cherniv, Sumy regions. That's just a couple of the regions, right? And so it's been all along the line of contact pretty hot. Waves of Russian bombing and infantry assaults drive major gains in the east. And this is where Russia is hitting its stride. They're chipping away, taking a little ground, a little ground, a little more ground, and they just keep doing that because they don't seem to value human life in the same way. They'll just send meat wave assaults. Russian assaults are raising pressure on the strategic eastern logistics hub of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. That's something that Ukraine really needs to hold on to. As waves of guided bombs and infantry lead some of Moscow's largest territorial gains since the spring. Okay, so they are making gains, and let's not deny that. Over the past 2 weeks, according to a volunteer helping people leave, Russia's gains of about 57 square kilometers, or about 22 square miles, in the space of a week are the third largest recorded since April, after they made only modest gains in June. So again, they just chip away and chip away and chip away, and they make some ground. Russian forces have been steadily inching forward on several fronts in the eastern Donetsk region, staging particularly fierce attacks near Pokrovsk, with Kyiv's troops stretched thin. The Russians are not piercing our defense, they are pushing it back. They are advancing 100, 150, 200 meters every day using this tactic, dropping guided bombs, then a meat assault, and if those are repelled, dropping guided bombs again, and a meat assault again. So that's how they're accomplishing this. This is a video of just what it looks like, so just see how the Russians, and it's not a large area, but they're still making these gains. They still keep chipping away at it daily. And that's what's happening. I mean, this is a fair understanding of what is going on the front lines. Okay, shifting gears now. The British intelligence update. The average daily Russian casualties, killed and wounded, in Ukraine has fallen over the past 2 months from a conflict high of 1,262 per day in May to 1,140 in July 2024. So the temperature has come down. Now in May, we're talking about like the Kharkiv offensive, and that was really a catastrophe for the Russians in multiple ways. Russia's casualty rate will likely continue to average above 1,000 a day through August 2024, the British intelligence update continues to say. Now, Russia is likely consolidating positions on the Kharkiv axis, and so they're trying to make a push there, just like they're trying to make a push near Покrovsk. Now, let's look at what the Ukrainians have done to the Russians. Here, breaking. This was yesterday in the early afternoon in U.S. time. So, Russia helicopter intercepts and destroys a Ukrainian missile in Donetsk Oblast. Well, okay. We can see some of that footage as well. I'm not going to show you the footage, but SBU, GRU, or GUR, Defense Forces destroy air defense aircraft guided air bombs in Morozovsk attack. Okay, so this is big last night. Last night, the SBU drones visited this airfield in the Rostov region, enemy air defense aircraft and warehouses with guided bombs. Detonation was so powerful that the locals lacked swear words to describe their impressions from the scale of the explosions and the cotton blossom. That's a explosion, an expression like we talk about a mushroom cloud. The cotton blossom that they saw. The Russian local authorities are trying to conceal the strike against a military target, reporting a fire at some storage facilities. Yeah, some storage facilities were hit. Okay, they always minimize it. Russian media reported that last night, as a result of a massive drone attack, several storage facilities were damaged in the Kamensky and Morozovsk regions or districts in Rostov region. Particularly, fuel containers went on fire in the territory of the oil depot number 7 in the Kamensky district. Okay, so where are we talking about? Here's Ukraine. The front lines stretch somewhere like this. And yeah, so I mean, it's pretty close. It's not out of reach of drones. Here's Kamensky, same kind of thing as well. Kamensky was over here, and it's okay. So what's this look like? Here's the emergency situation that has been declared following a nighttime drone attack. Residents are advised to close their windows and stay indoors. And here's some more of this. Yeah, so they were hit. I mean, there's no doubt about this. Russia claims to have intercepted numerous UAVs. Now, how many UAVs? Again, I said in the title, this is not clickbait to say massive Ukrainian drone attack. This year, Ukraine has intensified its drone attacks against the Russian oil industry, significantly disrupting fuel supplies critical for Russian military, while simultaneously decreasing the Kremlin's export revenues. Ukrainian drones also often target Russian military facilities inside Russia. Vasily Guleb, the governor of Rostov Oblast, initially reported the destruction of 3 drones in the north region around 1 a.m. Later, he stated that a total of 55 attack drones had targeted the oblast overnight. The oblast, somebody corrected I keep saying oblast instead of oblast overnight, resulting in damage to warehouses. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed to have destroyed 75 Ukrainian drones over various Russian regions during the night. So it was a pretty significant attack. Oh, before I go back to that, I think there's a little bit more. This Aerospace Forces Air Base in the Southern Military District, home to the 559th Bomber Aviation Regiment and Sukhoi Su-34 fullback fighter bombers. Russian telegram channel Astra reported that local residents near the airfield heard detonation, suggesting that either an ammunition warehouses or fuel tanks were on fire. So there's a lot of evidence here. Okay, so Ukrainian forces destroyed a rare and costly TOS-A1, I can't pronounce this, heavy flamethrower system valued at $15 million in the Zaporizhia direction. And then FPV drone of the 108th TD Brigade sneaks into the building where a Russian S-2S3 Akastia SPG was hiding. Okay, so you see this big explosion. So let's look at the very beginning. I'm not going to show the anything blow up or anything, but this is what it is. The SPV drone just slips in and blows the thing up. Now, what did they blow up? They blew up this, and this is a self-propelled artillery. Okay. Ukrainian forces reportedly downed a Su-25 in Zaporizhia Oblast, and you can see that for yourself. I'm not showing the video again for YouTube. Classic fireworks, Russian Buk air defense system. That went with a big boom. Zaporizhzhia Oblast, Ukrainian FPV munition flies into a loaded Russian TOS-1 thermobaric MRL, causing a catastrophic ammunition detonation that effectively disintegrated the Russian launcher. Well, why would the Russian launcher be disintegrated? Well, if you can make all these things blow up when you hit it, that's going to be a pretty significant boom, and it was a pretty significant boom. Okay, Ukraine's campaign against Russia's Black Sea Fleet in Crimea has been successful, but retaking the peninsula faces significant challenges due to its geography, fortifications, and Ukraine's lack of amphibious capabilities. I think that's fair. I mean, they wanted to get to this, but it's going to be a while before they have the capabilities or the manpower specifically. While we're speaking about manpower, this is a really interesting article. The elephant in the room. Ukraine's delayed and insufficient mobilization is the primary cause of Ukraine's current challenges at the front. It's not the only cause, but it's primary. They needed to mobilize far sooner than they did, mobilize more Ukrainians far sooner than they did. Allies have offered insufficient military aid, arriving too late and burdened with excessive restrictions. Fair, indisputable facts. Yet Ukraine's manpower shortage and its frontline situation would be better if it had mobilized earlier and more extensively. The enactment of Ukraine's mobilization law was significantly delayed, and the mobilization of men has been insufficient. If Ukraine loses, and I'm not predicting that they will, but it will be because of a shortage of mobilized men. That will not be the case on the Russian side, in my estimation. They're willing to just mobilize more men, send them into the wood chipper. Despite there being valid and compelling reasons for this, when confronted with an existential threat and genocide, no justification is sufficient to abstain from taking every possible action to enhance chances of survival. Ukraine could have strengthened its positions at the front lines earlier, reducing territorial losses by mobilizing more troops. And so they're losing ground because they don't have not just the artillery, but the manpower to really hold it. Okay, in certain areas, the situation on the front is somewhat critical. Overall, it's far from dire. That may or may not be. I'm not sure. I'm not at the front, but it is critical in a few areas. Pakrovsk and maybe a little bit by Kharkiv, but Pakrovsk particularly. Ukraine can describe it, the Russian invasion of Ukraine can be described from the perspective of Russia as a dismal failure at best. Remember, like, think about this. Would you have believed in March of 2022 that the Russians would still be battling for Chasiv Yar in August of 2024 or around Chasiv Yar, around this area, going toward Pakrovsk? Like, we thought, the whole world thought that Ukraine was in deep, deep trouble and was about to be rolled in just a few weeks, and that didn't happen. Despite suffering over 500,000 casualties and receiving material aid from its allies, Russia has yet to be successfully invade any of the 23 regional capitals or special status cities. That's impressive. So Ukraine is doing pretty well in that, when you frame it that way. Ukraine's situation will remain challenging for the coming months, but is expected to improve by the end of the year as mobilization begins to yield results. They really do have to mobilize in a significant way in order to get back on their feet. The undeniable reality is that Ukraine's allies have failed to provide sufficient support. That's very fair. And Ukraine will also need to mobilize more men in the future. That's also fair. While deeply unfair, there seems to be no alternative in this explanation. Ukraine's optimal approach to prevailing in this unjust war involves prioritizing defense, exercising extreme patience, and refraining from larger offensives. Yeah, this is a war of attrition now. There's not going to be a quick strike that ends it, in my estimation. After suffering significant losses in both personnel and resources, Russia will eventually be compelled to downsize its operations. Yeah, but it might take years. That's the problem. Okay, it's not going to be anything that's going to happen quickly. Okay, so I think this is a pretty fair, balanced assessment of what's going on. Ukraine really does need to mobilize more, and they have to do it quickly. Okay, last little bit. Defense Secretary in the U.S. revokes a plea deal for accused September 11th plotters. Now, what does that have to do with anything with Ukraine? Well, because you have to have a clear, compelling statement about what you're about and what stands you're going to make and not stand. That's where deterrence comes in. And so repealing this They said, we're guilty, we won't get the death penalty. No, you're getting the death penalty. And yeah, okay. So last little bit, Andrew Perpetua, well, he's wearing a helmet. Yeah, if you go into war on a motorcycle, like, and this is what I mean by the Russians don't seem to care about their men. If you're sending them forward on a motorcycle, you don't care about them. If you're sending them, perhaps pre-drone, if you were sending them on a motorcycle between units, like to carry a message or something, or something speedy, whatever. But to go into battle on a motorcycle, that's a death trap. Anyway, okay, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.